Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan El Rom.
In our top story, the Hamas terror group is suffering heavy losses and its hold on Gaza is crumbling. After dealing a devastating blow to the terror infrastructure in the coastal enclave, the IDF has wrapped up its intensive campaign in northern Gaza. Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has confirmed that the IDF is now phasing into lower-intensity operations in the north to keep the area secure. He said that hundreds of weapons production centers have been destroyed in operations in southern Gaza, where IDF troops are now focused.
The United Nations has announced it will finally investigate widespread evidence of sexual abuse by Hamas terrorists on October 7th and the days following. 3 months after the Iranian-backed terror group infiltrated the Jewish state, the world body has agreed to dispatch Pramila Patten, the UN Special Representative on Sexual Violence and Conflict, to gather information on the abuse. Patten is slated to meet with survivors, witnesses, and others affected by the sexual violence perpetrated by Hamas terrorists. She will also interview recently released hostages to hear of their rape and torture in Hamas captivity. The United Nations has been harshly criticized for turning a blind eye to the abuse of women in Israel by Hamas terrorists and has been accused of holding a double standard for Israeli victims.
More than 10,000 Hamas terrorists have been killed since the 7th of October. Israel vowed to target all Hamas leaders after the Iranian-backed terror group infiltrated the Jewish state and slaughtered 1,200 people and took 240 others hostage. More than 1,000 Hamas members were killed inside of Israel on the 7th of October, and 9,000 terrorists have been killed fighting the IDF in Gaza. The Iranian-backed terror group has fired more than 9,000 missiles into Israel since October 7th. Hundreds more projectiles misfired and landed inside of Gaza. The Israeli army confirmed that it has struck over 30,000 targets in the Gaza Strip, but not before making 79,000 phone calls, dropping 7.2 million leaflets in Arabic, sending 13.7 million text messages, and 15 million recorded calls to Gazans with evacuation warnings and instructions.
Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen fired on an American warship in the Red Sea. Central Command confirmed that an anti-ship cruise missile was launched from a Houthi-controlled area of Yemen towards the USS Laboon. U.S. fighter jets intercepted the rocket before it could damage the destroyer, which was patrolling the southern edge of the Red Sea. The Houthis have wreaked havoc in international shipping lanes, firing missiles, launching suicide drones, and dispatching pirates to hijack ships. U.S. President Joe Biden, who removed the Houthis from the list of known terror groups early in his term, has now decided to redesignate the Houthis as a global terrorist organization. Biden warned the Iranian-backed rebels that he will not hesitate to direct further measures to protect the free flow of international commerce as necessary.
Newly elected President of Argentina, Javier Milei, has announced his first official visit to the Jewish state in February, making him the first Latin American leader to come to Israel since the onset of the war with Hamas. Milei is a staunch supporter of Israel. He recently hosted Israel's foreign minister in Buenos Aires, where he expressed his solidarity with the Jewish people and said that he supports Israel's full right to defend itself against the Hamas terror group. Milei has pledged to move the Argentinian embassy to Jerusalem, and many experts are speculating that he may make this important announcement during his upcoming visit.
Thousands of evangelical Christians came out to support Israel as it defended itself against baseless genocide accusations at the International Court of Justice. The trial has been biased against the Jewish state from the beginning. It focused on alleged Israeli crimes against the Palestinians while ignoring the October 7th Hamas massacre that sparked the war. More than 30 Christian organizations penned an open letter expressing their opposition to South Africa's bogus allegations against Israel. This came as thousands of Christians descended on The Hague, wearing Israeli flags and holding pictures of the hostages as the trial commenced.
The U.S. Central Intelligence Agency has reportedly established a task force to locate top Hamas leaders and the hostages taken from Israel on October 7th. According to the New York Times, the team will work closely with Israel and will share intelligence with the Jewish state. More than 132 people remain in captivity in Gaza, and intelligence suggests that senior members of Hamas are hiding in tunnels under Gaza, surrounded by the hostages. The report noted that the task force has already provided high-level intel on senior terror leaders, including Saleh al-Aruri, the Hamas deputy who was recently killed in a targeted strike in Beirut, attributed to Israel.
2 Israelis, a mother and her son, were killed in their home by an anti-tank rocket fired into northern Israel by Hezbollah in Lebanon. The Iranian-backed terror group has fired some 2,000 rockets into the Jewish state since October 7th, prompting the evacuation of dozens of communities in the north. The deaths of 45-year-old Barak Ayalon and his 76-year-old mother Miri were announced just hours after a Hezbollah terror cell infiltrated the Jewish state and was eliminated by IDF forces patrolling the border near Mount Dov. Hezbollah claims that 161 of their terrorists have been killed in Israeli strikes, many of which targeted senior terror leaders in Lebanon.
The majority of Israelis support the voluntary relocation of Gazans to other countries. A survey conducted by Direct Polls reflects that 76% of Israelis support the voluntary transfer or immigration of residents of the Gaza Strip. Intelligence Minister Ghila Gamliel addressed this issue during a recent speech at the Sovereignty Movement conference. She said that her office has been working on scenarios for the 2 million people of Gaza after the war, and that now is the time to try new solutions. Gamliel said instead of funneling money to rebuild Gaza or to the failed United Nations Relief and Works Agency, the international community can assist in the cost of humanitarian voluntary resettlement and help the people of Gaza build new lives in new host countries. She appealed to the international community that is so concerned with the plight of the Palestinians to open their doors and let those who wish to join the hundreds of thousands of Gazans who have already left voluntarily over the last few years.
Israeli soccer player Sagiv Yecheskel was arrested in Turkey and deported back to Israel for displaying a symbol of support for the hostages held by Hamas in Gaza. After scoring a goal for the Turkish league in a big game last week, Yecheskel made a heart sign with his hands and showed the words 100 days, October 7th. The Turkish Soccer League promptly suspended Yecheskel, and the Turkish Justice Minister launched an investigation into what he called inciting the public to hatred and hostility. Yecheskel landed in Israel the next day and received a hero's welcome for standing with the Jewish state and reminding the world of the hostages in Hamas captivity.
Israel's technology sector has displayed resilience and strength despite the many challenges it faced in 2023. An annual report released by Startup Nation Central highlighted the stability of the tech industry in Israel. Avi Hassan, the CEO of Startup Nation Central, said that the outlook for 2024 is cautious but optimistic. He said, "We hope the ecosystem's bedrock of innovation, global partnership, and proven resilience will steer it through uncertainty towards a continued growth trajectory."
2 IDF reserve officers fighting to protect the Jewish state from the Hamas terror group discovered an ancient mortar in southern Israel. The soldiers were stationed near the Gaza border when they located the 10-kilogram, bowl-shaped basalt vessel. One of the fighters, Lieutenant Colonel Yair Amitzur of the Homefront Command, is an archaeologist with the Israel Antiquities Authority. He immediately identified the artifact as an ancient grinding tool and notified the IAA. He and his fellow reserve officers were presented with certificates of good citizenry due to the find.
The Jewish people are returning to their historic homeland despite the war with Hamas. The prophet Isaiah said that God will gather the exiles from Israel and that he will collect the scattered of Judah from the 4 corners of the earth. In Israel, we continue to see this prophecy being fulfilled, and even though the Jewish people have faced the most devastating tragedy since the Holocaust, more Jews are immigrating to Israel or making Aliyah. In an exclusive interview with the Jerusalem Post, Israel's Minister of Immigration, Ophir Sofer, confirmed that there has been a 400% increase of immigration inquiries from France and a 100% increase in inquiries from North America. Sofer explained that the State of Israel views new immigrants as a national asset, and his ministry is preparing for a wave of new Olim to the Jewish state.
That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned now for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. We're here in our beautiful studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is David Bedein. He is the director of the Center for Near East Policy Research. David, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
So the Center for Near East Policy Research mostly deals with the issue of UNRWA. Can you tell our viewers what is UNRWA?
The United Nations Relief and Works Agency, which maintains 59 refugee camps around the Arab world and in Judea, Samaria, and Jerusalem, and Gaza. And what's important is that UNRWA maintains these 59 refugee camps not as a place, as a way station for where they're going to be in the future, but as a way to inculcate with them the idea that they're going back to where they came from in 48. And what we have discovered, and I've been working on this since 1987, is that UNRWA indoctrinates them with the idea of the right of return by force of arms. And it's very unusual that a United Nations agency would promote violence and war, but that's what we've discovered.
Well, it's also very interesting that UNRWA only deals with Palestinians. All other refugees are in UNHCR, and it's only for one generation. UNRWA is forever. It's a ongoing. It's kind of like a Ponzi scheme. Can you explain that?
Sure, it's refugeehood for perpetuity, forever. And it's used as a tool of the Palestine Liberation Organization, the PLO, and Hamas, which is an integral part of the PLO, to promote the idea that you're going back to where you came from after you fight for it. And until October 7th, this was more or less theoretical in the world. People didn't believe it. Then people didn't believe it. People would conduct mass killings in order to promote their cause. But that's what happened. And the people who committed the acts of sabotage on October 7th, they were living in UNRWA refugee camps, inculcated what we've shown with our movies. We've made 24 movies of UNRWA.
Well, this is a very important point. You know, UNRWA is in the news all the time now because you're literally seeing Hamas using UNRWA facilities, UNRWA supplies. UNRWA officials were holding Israelis hostage. So how is this allowed to go on?
By keeping the media out of it. Everything we've done over the last 24 years, and actually 36 years, in exposing this has been pushed to the side. It's not comfortable. So I'm pleased to be on this program because Jewish and Christian groups have not allowed me to speak. Now, this is my first opportunity since October 7th to say, excuse me, but this was planned systematically in the UNRWA camps under the supervision of a United Nations agency with the agreement of 167 nations, all of whom support the UNRWA system. And we've been blowing the whistle. And I knew a psychiatrist who dealt with drug abuse. He said, I didn't get the help I needed in drug rehabilitation until the son of a cleric died of an overdose. And this is what happened today. My friends living in the kibbutz, which was most affected, kibbutz Be'eri, they had the biggest and most important dialogue group going on with the UNRWA camps, and to the extent to which they even had a joint art exhibition. And my friend Vivian Silver, who was killed there, was murdered there, she was I called her while this was happening, see how she was. She had already been murdered. The idea of an entity that will take you because you're a Jew and murder you, it was something from the Nazi era. We didn't know that it would happen now. I did only because I watched it, listened to it, filmed it, shared it, went to several parliaments, and was silenced.
So, David, you know, one of the things that's so shocking about this is that UNRWA isn't funded by Iran. UNRWA isn't funded by, Yemen. The biggest majority funder of UNRWA is the United States of America. The second biggest are, and the third and the fourth and fifth are all in Europe. Why are they continuing to fund this organization when it's so clear now that they're involved in the activities, either directly or indirectly, of October 7th and the war that's continuing?
Let me say something positive about the United States. I'm an originally American citizen. I've been in Israel for 53 years. However, there are times when I'm proud of being an American. The United States allocated $300 million to UNRWA, which never got there. Why? Because Senator James Risch, a senator from Idaho, made sure that there would be an UNRWA U.S. accord, that they can't touch the money until they cancel their curriculum. And guess what? For the last two years, they're screaming about the fact that they haven't gotten U.S. funds because UNRWA will not change their curriculum. You can see the curriculum on our website as it's listed below, and you'll see unbelievable things.
Member of Knesset Shireen Haskel is the chair of the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus, but she's also the chair of the UNRWA Caucus, and she believes that Christians have a role to play in fighting against UNRWA and what they're doing. What can Christians do to get involved?
Say no. Simple like that. Your government may be giving money to UNRWA under very nice humanitarian reasons. They want to help refugees. Say no. There is no accountability in UNRWA. No transparency. Money used for food goes into weapons. We've been showing this for the last 37 years. The head of medical services who worked with UNRWA, he's the guy who exposed the fact that money for food and money for hospitals went into weaponry and went into tunnels. And this would have been very theoretical. You may have wanted to commit me to an insane asylum had I said this before October 7. Now it's known. So as we say, let my people know. I'm asking the Christian world to take responsibility. Many of them are Christian nations, and I don't think Senator Risch would mind say that he's an evangelical Christian who made sure to keep to keep UNRWA honest, to keep UNRWA, and when we showed him that they are not changing their curriculum, no more.
David, there are literally tens of millions of people watching the show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
Watch what you do with UNRWA. Make sure that UNRWA is financed not to promote murder, but to promote education for peace.
Thank you, David, for being on the show. And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
And now, the truth from Zion.
As war rages in the Middle East, news organizations and social media platforms have perpetuated a staggering bias when it comes to reporting on the Hamas-Israel conflict.
The media bias against Israel is almost unbelievable. Some refuse to call Hamas terrorists. They use the Hamas spokespeople's lies as their talking points. And they even have reporters on their payroll who were present during the October 7th massacre.
When Hamas terrorists crossed the border at 6:30 Saturday morning on October 7th, they massacred innocent civilians, raped women and girls, beheaded babies, and pillaged communities. 1,200 Israelis and foreign nationals were killed. 240 people were taken hostage. Within days, media outlets, international leaders, and university professors were justifying the carnage. Reporters even tried to suggest that, given the context of the conflict, the violence could be understood. Social media influencers are becoming the biggest accomplices to the crimes of Hamas. Some social media influencers have racked up more followers than there are residents of Israel and Gaza combined. The goal of many is to motivate an uprising against the Jewish people by sharing false information and empowering anti-Semites to express their deep-seated hatred of Jews. United Nations Chief Antonio Guterres claimed the event did not happen in a vacuum, and he stated that Israel's military response was a form of collective punishment. Media coverage has frequently favored the Palestinian perspective, choosing to highlight the destruction in Gaza while downplaying attacks on Israelis. One point of contention is the reluctance of media outlets like the BBC and CNN to label Hamas as a terrorist organization, even though the United States and the European Union declared them as such. Reporters also ignore the 20-year history of Hamas launching rocket attacks on Israeli civilians. These so-called freedom fighters mutilated babies, burned victims alive, and caused psychological trauma to family units by forcing them to watch their relatives being murdered. Foreign reporters who were photographed and videoed covering the October 7th massacre are suspected of knowing about the barbaric attack in advance. Reuters, the Associated Press, CNN, and the New York Times were some of the major organizations whose freelancers were at the border crossing within an hour or so of the incursion. One of the journalists was seen in a photo receiving a kiss from Yahya Sinwar, the Hamas leader who orchestrated the savage attack on October 7th. This leads to serious questions about the objectivity of their coverage, an issue that has received little international attention. Hamas is responsible for the Palestinian Health Ministry, which is the only agency recording the number of deaths in Gaza. International news organizations have conveniently trusted the data shared by the Palestinian Ministry of Health. News outlets are using the Hamas-published figures without telling viewers or readers where the numbers come from, or that the News Bureau has not verified the facts themselves. This became particularly dangerous when the New York Times published Hamas propaganda, which stated that the Al-Ahli hospital in Gaza had been bombed by Israel, killing hundreds of people. Israel was condemned by the international community as journalists regurgitated the Hamas lies that hundreds of civilians had been killed. The IDF went to work and quickly proved that the rocket had hit the parking lot and not the actual hospital, and was in fact a misfired rocket launched by Palestinian terrorists. The damage to Israel's image was done, and the false narrative was simply swept under the rug. The bias in the media coverage continues to stoke the flames of conflict as war rages on in the Middle East. Anti-Semitism in the United States is up more than 300% since October 7th. It's even higher in other Western countries. The issue needs urgent attention. As narratives are skewed and misinformation is shared, the societal divide deepens even further. It is now more important than ever that the public needs to get informed about the facts and be selective about who they trust for their news.
Israel is the only free democracy in the Middle East, and time and again, the international media sides with terror organizations.
Responsible reporting is crucial. If not, the danger of media bias will be translated into violence on the streets. Up next, the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
Shalom, dear friends, here from Jerusalem. Israel is at war. On October 7, more than 2,000 Hamas terrorists entered into Israel. They killed more than 1,300 civilians. They took 200 hostages over to Gaza. They butchered, they raped, they mutilated bodies in the most demonic way imaginable. Right now, Israeli troops are fighting a war in Gaza to liberate the region from this demonic terrorist regime of Hamas. What is quite unique is that just 2 days before those atrocities started to happen, the Christian Embassy was involved in a very unique way exactly on that location where the attacks were taking place. As a matter of fact, the Lord was leading us over this last few years to do extensive work in the Gaza envelope. And in a way, you can say the Lord embedded us in this crisis region around Gaza. And therefore, we feel that the Lord called us to stand alongside this crisis-ridden people in the Gaza envelope. Please have a look.
Since October 7th, Israel has been engaged in a defensive war against Hamas terrorism. Over these past days, the people of Israel have endured unspeakable atrocities that left families displaced and lives shattered. Right now, the ICEJ is actively supporting Israel by providing essential supplies and protective gear to first responders. We're renovating existing communal bomb shelters and supplying new ones to communities under attack. We're also helping to relocate evacuees, provide them with food and emergency aid, and offer toys and activities for children. With your help, we look to provide an ambulance to the affected areas, along with other medical equipment and urgent aid for trauma care.
In these very difficult and painful days, ICJ is here on the ground in Haifa with some of our staff from Jerusalem and from Haifa, representing many different countries, in order to stand with Israel. We do it in a very practical way today. We dispatch all kinds of toys that we will bring soon to places where evacuees are from the south. Haifa actually took many in from the south, and they're staying in all kinds of places in different schools, and the people came with nothing, and there are many children. So we want to give a little bit of joy to the children today when we go soon, to bring it to them, to bring those toys, and we want to stand with Israel in this very, very difficult time, and we want to be your hands and feet.
We are today in the center of Israel, and as you can see here behind me, we are packing food for evacuated families, and this is an ongoing effort that we do with other Israeli companies.
Dear friends, in these times of crisis, when so many families are being evacuated from the south of Israel, they're going with just the clothes on their back, and they're in great need of food items, basic items, clothing, toiletries, toys for children. And we want to do everything that we can to help, along with all of Israel at this time. But if we donate these items and there's no way to get them to the families, we haven't actually met the need. And so when we were approached with asking for a truck to help get the items to these families, we knew right away that this was a project for us. Today, the ICJ has donated 2 trucks to help meet this need. And I want to say thank you to all of our donors and friends around the world who have made it possible.
You have just seen that our work in this crisis-ridden area, in a very literal sense, saves lives. I want to personally invite you to partner with the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem as we are standing with these people at the Gaza envelope. Help us to build more bomb shelters. Stand with us as we are providing more life-saving, first responding devices and equipment in this region. But also please stand with us as we are helping the many thousand evacuees that had to leave this region for this current crisis and war. In these critical times, I do ask you to stand with Israel like never before. Pray for us, pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and remember that as you stand with Israel, the Lord promises, I will bless those who bless thee. And with this, I want to wish you blessings and shalom right here from Jerusalem.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan El Rome, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.